The iron rails of the Union Pacific stretched into the horizon like the spine of America, bearing witness to the secret Sophia Lambert had carried for 6 months. She wasn't running west to find something, but to escape everything. Blood-tinged sunset painted the Nebraska territory, as Sophia stumbled from the freight car that had been her home for the last 100 miles. Her body aching from the wooden floor and her soul weary from a journey measured in heartbeats rather than miles. The year was 1869, and the promise of a new life lingered in the Western territories like gold dust in a riverbed visible but maddeningly difficult to grasp. Sophia's once fine dress, now tattered and stained with the grime of travel, had been beautiful when she'd left Philadelphia. Her auburn hair, once elegantly pinned, hung in tangled waves around her face, framing green eyes that had seen too much for her 22 years. "They won't look for me here," she whispered to herself, watching the train pull away in a cloud of steam and smoke. Night was falling fast, and with it came the biting cold of the plains. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, a small satchel containing her mother's silver locket, $15 sewn into her hem, and the weight of secrets pressing down upon her shoulders. Sophia sank down onto the hard ground beside the tracks, pulling her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. The station at Clearwater Creek was still miles away, and her legs refused to carry her another step. The lonely whistle of the departing train echoed across the emptiness, taking with it any hope of shelter for the night. "I'll keep moving at first light," she promised herself, digging her fingers into the dirt to create a small depression for her hip. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her that pride had kept her from accepting the scraps offered by a kind-faced woman several cars back. "Just need to rest." Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the howling of distant coyotes and the bone-deep cold that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Each time she drifted off, memories chased her into unconsciousness, her father's face contorted with rage, the glint of his pocket watch as he'd raised his hand, the sound of her mother's pleading. Dawn broke with cruel brightness, painting the plains in gold and sending long shadows across Sophia's huddled form. She didn't hear the approach of hooves until they were almost upon her, and when she opened her eyes, it was to find herself looking up at a man silhouetted against the rising sun. "Madam," his voice was deep, tinged with concern and the slightest hint of suspicion. "You alive down there?" Sophia struggled to sit up, painfully aware of how she must look a woman alone, sleeping in the dirt beside railroad tracks. "Yes," she managed, her voice cracking from thirst. "I'm fine." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. His face came into focus as he crouched beside her, weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. A Stetson hat sat low on his forehead, and a star-shaped badge glinted on his chest. "Sheriff Wyatt Daniels," he said, offering her a canteen. "And I'd wager my best horse that fine isn't the word for your situation, miss." Sophia hesitated before accepting the water, taking small sips despite her desperate thirst. "Sophia Lambert," she replied, offering only her name and nothing more. Sheriff Daniels studied her face with unsettling attention, taking in the fading bruise near her temple that her hair couldn't quite hide. "Train left you behind." "No," she said, looking away. "I got off here." "There's nothing here," he pointed out gently. "Nearest town's Clearwater Creek, 15 miles west." Sophia struggled to stand, determined to maintain what little dignity she had left. Her legs betrayed her, buckling beneath her weight, and she would have fallen if the sheriff hadn't caught her arm. "You're in no condition to walk 15 miles, he said, the authority in his voice softened by genuine concern. When's the last time you ate something? Sophia couldn't remember. Yesterday, the day before. The days had blurred together since she'd fled Philadelphia in the dead of night. Sheriff Daniels seemed to read the answer in her silence. His expression shifted, determination replacing his initial wariness. Miss Lambert, I don't know what trouble you're running from, but you can't stay here. I have nowhere to go, she admitted, the words escaping before she could catch them. The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion but with a decision being made. You're coming home with me. Sophia stiffened, taking a step back. I don't need charity. It's not charity, he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting. My sister runs the boarding house in town. She's always looking for help, and you look capable enough once you've had a proper meal and some rest. I can't pay, you can work, he interrupted. Clean rooms, help with cooking, whatever Martha needs. It's not charity if you earn your keep. Sophia hesitated, weighing her dwindling options. She couldn't stay here, and 15 miles might as well be 1,000 in her condition. Just until I can make other arrangements, she finally agreed. Sheriff Daniels nodded once, retrieving her small satchel from the ground. Can you ride? Yes, she answered. It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd ridden at her grandfather's estate as a girl, though never a horse like the powerful chestnut stallion that stood nearby, pawing at the ground impatiently. If the sheriff doubted her, he didn't show it. He secured her satchel to the saddle, then offered his hands to help her mount. I'll walk alongside. It's not far. The lie hung between them. 15 miles was indeed far, but Sophia didn't call him on it. With as much grace as she could muster, she allowed him to help her onto the horse, settling uncomfortably in the saddle. Why would you help a stranger? She asked as he took the reins and began leading the horse westward. Sheriff Daniels didn't look back at her as he answered. Because my mother would haunt me from the grave if I left a woman alone in the dirt beside the tracks. They traveled in silence for nearly an hour, Sophia clinging to the saddle horn as the horse's steady gait lulled her into a half-dreaming state. When the sheriff finally spoke again, his question startled her back to full awareness. What are you running from, Miss Lambert? Sophia's fingers instinctively rose to the fading bruise at her temple. What makes you think I'm running from something? He glanced up at her, those storm-gray eyes seeing too much. People heading toward something don't usually sleep beside railroad tracks. They have destinations, plans. You look like someone who left in a hurry. I'd rather not discuss it, she said stiffly. To her surprise, he nodded. Fair enough. We all have pasts we'd rather leave behind. Out here, most folks don't ask too many questions. Is that why you came west? She asked, seizing the opportunity to shift attention away from herself. A shadow crossed his face. Partly, fought for the Union in the war. Came home to Kentucky and found nothing worth staying for. The war had ended 4 years ago, but Sophia knew its wounds still ran deep across the country. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said with a shrug. Found something better out here, purpose, community, people who need protecting. From what? The usual. Cattle rustlers, land disputes, the occasional desperate man making poor choices. He adjusted his hat against the rising sun. The railroad's bringing more people through every day, some good, some not so good. Which am I? Sophia asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Sheriff Daniels looked up at her, a hint of a smile softening his weathered features. That remains to be seen, Miss Lambert. By midday, the silhouette of Clearwater Creek appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings rising from the plains like an island in a sea of grass. Sophia's body ached from the unfamiliar posture of riding, and her empty stomach had long since stopped protesting. Almost there, Sheriff Daniels said, pointing toward the town. Martha's place is on the far side near the church. Sophia nodded weakly, fighting to stay upright in the saddle. The sheriff must have noticed her struggle because he stopped the horse and looked up at her with concern. "We can rest a while if you need to," he offered. "No," she said firmly. "I can make it." His expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he resumed walking, shortening the horse's lead to stay closer to her side. "Tell me something, Miss Lambert," he said after a moment. "Do you have any skills that might be useful in a place like Clearwater Creek?" Sophia almost laughed at the question. Her father had ensured she was accomplished in all the ways a Philadelphia society daughter should be: playing the piano, watercolor painting, French conversation, and needlepoint, none of which seemed particularly valuable in a frontier town. "I can read and write," she offered. "I'm good with figures, and I can cook, though not." She hesitated. "Not on a wood stove." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Reading and figures might be useful. The schoolteacher left last month to get married. Town's been looking for a replacement." "I've never taught children. Might be worth considering," he said. "Pays better than housekeeping at the boarding house." The idea of standing before a classroom of frontier children sent a wave of anxiety through Sophia, but she tucked the suggestion away. Any respectable employment would be a blessing. As they approached the outskirts of town, activity became visible: wagons moving along the main street, people carrying goods between buildings, a blacksmith hammering at his forge. To Sophia's surprise, the town appeared more established than she'd expected, with painted storefronts and even a small, steepled church. Sheriff Daniels led her horse down the main street, nodding at the curious glances they received. Sophia kept her eyes lowered, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. After several uncomfortable minutes under public scrutiny, they stopped before a two-story building with a wide porch and a sign reading Clearwater Creek Boarding House. "This is Martha's place," the sheriff said, helping Sophia dismount. Her legs nearly gave way as her feet touched the ground, and he steadied her with a firm grip on her elbow. "Best cooking in 3 counties and the cleanest rooms you'll find between here and Omaha." The door of the boarding house opened before they reached it, and a woman emerged onto the porch. She shared the sheriff's storm-gray eyes, though hers were framed by laugh lines rather than the weathered squint of someone who spent days in the sun. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and her apron bore evidence of the morning's cooking. "Wyatt Daniels," she called, placing her hands on her hips. "You were supposed to be back from your rounds last night." "Got delayed," he answered, guiding Sophia up the steps. "Martha, this is Miss Sophia Lambert." "Miss Lambert, my sister Martha Daniels." Martha's expression shifted from exasperation to concern as she took in Sophia's appearance. "Good Lord, girl, what happened to you?" "I found her by the tracks east of town," Sheriff Daniels explained before Sophia could answer. "She needs a place to stay and mentioned she might be looking for work." Martha's sharp eyes missed nothing, taking in the quality of Sophia's ruined dress, the fading bruise at her temple, and the proud set of her shoulders despite her obvious exhaustion. "Can you clean a room properly?" "Yes," Sophia answered, though she'd never cleaned anything more challenging than her own writing desk. Martha replied, clearly unconvinced. "Well, come inside. You look like you need feeding before anything else." The interior of the boarding house was warm and smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Martha led them through a tidy sitting room into a large kitchen at the back of the house, where she gestured for Sophia to sit at a sturdy wooden table. "Sit," she ordered. "I'll fix you a plate." Sheriff Daniels hung his hat on a hook by the door. "I'll see to my horse and be back," he said, his eyes lingering on Sophia for a moment before he turned and left. Martha placed a steaming bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread before Sophia, then poured a cup of coffee and added a generous spoonful of sugar. "Eat slowly," she advised. Your stomach won't be used to it if you've been without. Sophia wanted to devour everything in sight, but forced herself to take small, deliberate bites. The stew was rich with vegetables and chunks of beef, better than anything she'd tasted since leaving Philadelphia. "Thank you," she said between careful spoonfuls. "This is very kind." Martha sat across from her, arms folded across her chest. "My brother has a habit of collecting strays." Sophia stiffened. "I'm not a stray." "No," Martha raised an eyebrow. "Then what would you call a young woman sleeping beside railroad tracks miles from nowhere?" "Unfortunate," Sophia answered. Meeting the older woman's gaze directly to her surprise, Martha laughed a warm, genuine sound that transformed her stern features. "Fair enough. Finish your meal and then we'll see about getting you cleaned up. I've got an empty room upstairs you can use for now." "I don't have much money," Sophia admitted. "We'll work something out," Martha replied with a wave of her hand. "This town needs more women anyway. Too many men with too few civilizing influences, if you ask me." By the time Sheriff Daniels returned, Sophia had finished her meal and was feeling more human than she had in days. The combination of food and the promise of shelter had restored some of her depleted courage. "Martha treating you all right?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yes, thank you," Sophia replied. "Your sister has been very kind." Martha snorted as she collected the empty dishes. "I've been practical is what I've been. Girl needs looking after and I need help around here." She pointed a wooden spoon at her brother. "You staying for supper?" "Can't," he answered. "Need to finish my rounds and check on the Miller place. They reported missing cattle yesterday." "Again?" Martha frowned. "That's the third time this month, I know." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Something's not right, too organized to be opportunistic thieves." Sophia listened to their exchange with interest, grateful to focus on someone else's problems rather than her own. There was an easiness between the siblings that spoke of a deep bond, and she felt a pang of envy for their evident closeness. "Miss Lambert," Sheriff Daniels said, turning to her. "I'll check in tomorrow to see how you're settling in. If you need anything before then, Martha knows where to find me." "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No need," he replied, settling his hat back on his head. "Just get some rest and don't give my sister any trouble." After he left, Martha showed Sophia to a small but clean room on the second floor. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand with a porcelain bowl and pitcher, a simple chest of drawers, and a hook on the wall for clothing. "It's not fancy," Martha said, "but it's private and the mattress is free of vermin, which is more than can be said for some establishments around here." "It's perfect," Sophia replied honestly. After weeks of running, hiding, and sleeping wherever she could find shelter, the simple room seemed like unimaginable luxury. Martha nodded, then pointed to a door across the hall. "Bathing rooms there. I'll have hot water sent up and I'll find you some clean clothes. You and I are different sizes, but I have a boarder about your build who might have something to spare." Left alone, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the clean quilt. For the first time since fleeing Philadelphia, she allowed herself to believe she might have found a safe haven. Whether it would remain safe if her past caught up with her was another matter entirely, but for now, she would accept this moment of peace. True to her word, Martha arranged for a bath and found Sophia a simple blue calico dress that, while not fashionable, was clean and intact. By evening, Sophia had washed away the dirt of her journey and changed into the borrowed clothes. Her own ruined dress lay soaking in a basin, though she doubted it could ever be restored to its former condition. After helping Martha serve dinner to the boarder's 3 railroad workers, an elderly widower, and a young couple awaiting the completion of their house at the edge of town, Sophia retired to her room, exhaustion overtaking her despite her earlier rest. Sleep came quickly, deep and dreamless for the first time in weeks. When she woke to sunlight streaming through the small window, it took her a moment to remember where she was. A knock at the door brought her fully awake. "Miss Lambert," Martha called. "Breakfast is ready if you're feeling up to joining us." "Yes, thank you," Sophia replied, quickly smoothing her hair and straightening the borrowed dress. "I'll be right down." The kitchen was busy with morning activity boarders coming and going, Martha efficiently managing multiple cooking tasks at once, the clatter of dishes and conversation filling the air. Sophia stood uncertainly in the doorway until Martha noticed her. "There you are," the older woman said. "Grab that coffee pot and start refilling cups. Plates are on the sideboard when you're ready to eat yourself." Grateful for the clear instruction, Sophia did as she was told, moving around the table refilling coffee cups and nodding at the thanks she received. The simple task gave her purpose, and she found herself relaxing as she worked. "You're a natural," commented one of the railroad workers, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "Martha usually scares off help within a day." "I heard that, Frank Miller," Martha called from the stove. "And I don't scare anyone off. They leave because they can't keep up." The boarders laughed, and Sophia found herself smiling at the good-natured exchange. This was so different from the formal, tense breakfasts of her childhood home, where her father ruled the table with oppressive silence, broken only by criticism of whatever failed to meet his exacting standards. After the boarders had departed for their various occupations, Martha sat down with Sophia to discuss her situation more thoroughly. "I can offer you room and board plus $2 a week to start," Martha said. "Work includes cleaning rooms, helping with meals, laundry, and whatever else needs doing. If you prove reliable, we can discuss a raise after a month." $2 a week was far less than Sophia had ever imagined earning, but with room and board included, it seemed a fair offer. "That's generous, thank you." Martha studied her with those penetrating gray eyes. "Wyatt mentioned you can read and do figures." "Yes," Sophia confirmed. "I was educated at Miss Hartwell's Academy for Young Ladies in Philadelphia." Martha's eyebrows rose slightly. "Fancy. And now you're here cleaning rooms in Clearwater Creek. Life takes strange turns, doesn't it?" Sophia looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. Before she could formulate an answer, the front door opened and Sheriff Daniels entered, removing his hat as he stepped into the kitchen. "Morning, ladies," he greeted them. "Miss Lambert, good to see you looking more rested." Sophia felt a warmth rise to her cheeks under his direct gaze. "Thank you again for your help yesterday." He waved away her thanks, accepting the cup of coffee Martha poured for him. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "If you're interested in something beyond housekeeping, I spoke with Mayor Reynolds this morning about the school position." Martha looked between them with interest. "School position? Miss Lambert has education," the sheriff explained. "Town needs a teacher." "I've never taught before," Sophia protested. "I wouldn't know where to begin." "The requirements aren't particularly demanding," Sheriff Daniels replied. "Reading, writing, arithmetic, some history." The school has about 15 students ranging from 6 to 13 years old. "It pays $12 a month plus a room at the schoolhouse," Martha added, clearly warming to the idea. "Better than what I can offer you here." Sophia's mind raced. Teaching would provide more independence and security than working as a housekeeper, but it would also place her in a more visible position within the community. "If anyone were looking for her, could I perhaps consider it?" she asked. "I'm grateful for any work, but teaching is a serious responsibility." Sheriff Daniels nodded. "Of course. Mayor said the position needs filling by next week when school reopens after harvest. You have a few days to decide. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work as Sophia followed Martha's instructions, learning the routine of the boarding house. By evening, her hands were raw from scrubbing and her back ached from bending over laundry, but she felt a satisfaction in the honest labor that surprised her. No one here cared about her family name or social connections. They cared only that she worked hard and did her part. Over the next 3 days, Sophia settled into a rhythm at the boarding house, gradually earning Martha's grudging approval with her willingness to learn and her attention to detail. The boarders treated her with a respectful distance, though she noticed the youngest of the railroad workers, a sandy-haired man named Thomas, watching her with obvious interest during meals. Sheriff Daniels appeared each morning for coffee, ostensibly to check on town business with various boarders, but Sophia couldn't help noticing that his eyes frequently found their way to her as she worked. On the third morning, he lingered after the others had left. "Have you given any more thought to the teaching position?" he asked, turning his coffee cup between his hands. Sophia hesitated. "I have, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. Mayor Reynolds asked me to show you the schoolhouse if you're interested." He glanced at Martha. "If your slave driver here can spare you for an hour." Martha rolled her eyes. "Take her. She's been working hard enough to earn a break, which is more than I can say for some people." The schoolhouse stood at the eastern edge of town, a simple one-room building with a small bell tower. Adjacent to it was a modest cabin that Sophia assumed was the teacher's residence. Sheriff Daniels retrieved a key from his pocket and unlocked the schoolhouse door. "Previous teacher left everything in good order," he said as they entered. The interior was sparse but functional, rows of benches and desks facing a larger desk at the front, a blackboard on the wall, and shelves containing a small collection of books. Sunlight streamed through windows on both sides, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. "It's lovely," Sophia said, running her fingers along the nearest desk, "but I'm still not certain I can teach children." Sheriff Daniels leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore the room. "Can I ask you something, Miss Lambert?" She turned to face him. "Yes." "What exactly were your plans when you got off that train in the middle of nowhere?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. I didn't have any," she admitted after a moment. "I just needed to get away." He nodded as though her answer confirmed something. "Sometimes life doesn't give us choices we like, just choices we have to make." He gestured around the schoolroom. "This town needs someone who can read and write to teach its children. You need a fresh start somewhere people won't ask too many questions about your past." Sophia's breath caught. "Are you asking questions about my past, Sheriff?" "No," he answered, his eyes meeting hers steadily. "I'm offering you a future." Something in his words, or perhaps in the way he said them, made Sophia's heart beat faster. The simplicity of his offer and the understanding in his gaze spoke of a kindness she hadn't expected to find so far from everything familiar. "I'll do it," she said before she could reconsider. "I'll take the teaching position." Relief and something else, approval, flashed across his face. "Good. I'll let the mayor know." He pushed away from the doorframe and moved toward her, offering a small key. "This is yours, then, for both buildings." As she took the key, their fingers brushed briefly, and Sophia felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. If the sheriff noticed her reaction, he gave no indication. "School starts Monday," he continued. "Mayor's wife will come by tomorrow to help you get settled in and explain how things have been run in the past." "Thank you," Sophia said, closing her hand around the key. "For everything." Sheriff Daniels nodded once, then gestured toward the door. "I should get you back to Martha before she decides I've kidnapped her new helper." The walk back to the boarding house was quiet, both of them seemingly lost in thought. As they approached the front porch, Sheriff Daniels cleared his throat. "Sunday evenings, Martha hosts dinner for us and a few friends," he said. "Nothing formal. Would you consider joining us tomorrow night?" "I'd like that," Sophia replied, surprised by how much she meant it. He touched the brim of his hat. "Until then, Miss Lambert." Sophia watched him walk away, aware of a strange lightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the key in her hand and everything to do with the man who had given it to her. The next day passed in a flurry of activity. As Sophia moved her few belongings to the teacher's cabin and met with Mrs. Reynolds, the mayor's wife, a plump, energetic woman who talked incessantly as she showed Sophia the schoolhouse records and curriculum materials. "The children are good-hearted, mostly," Mrs. Reynolds assured her, "though the Hale boys can be a handful when they set their minds to mischief. Their father's the blacksmith, enormous man, but gentle as a lamb with his wife and little ones." Sophia tried to absorb all the information being thrown at her, which children needed extra help with reading, which parents were supportive, which families might need consideration when assigning work that required books or materials they couldn't afford. "And of course, you must join us for church this morning," Mrs. Reynolds added, as if it were a foregone conclusion. Sophia had never been particularly religious, attending services in Philadelphia more out of social obligation than spiritual conviction. But she recognized that in a small town like Clearwater Creek, church was as much about community as faith. "I'd be honored," she replied. The small wooden church was packed when they arrived, and Sophia felt dozens of curious eyes on her as Mrs. Reynolds led her to a pew near the front. The attention made her uncomfortable, but she kept her head high, returning the nods and smiles of those they passed. She spotted Sheriff Daniels and Martha already seated halfway down the aisle. The sheriff stood as they approached, tipping his hat slightly in greeting. "Miss Lambert will be joining us," Mrs. Reynolds announced, though it was clearly unnecessary given the watching congregation. "She's our new schoolteacher, starting tomorrow." A murmur ran through the church at this news, and Sophia felt her cheeks warm under the scrutiny. Before she could respond, the church door opened again, and a hush fell over the assembly. Sophia turned to see what had caused the reaction and saw a tall, imposing man in an expensive black suit entering the church. His silver hair and meticulously groomed beard contrasted sharply with his tanned skin, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Judge Blackwell," Mrs. Reynolds whispered, noticing Sophia's questioning look. "Circuit judge for this part of the territory. Visits every few months to handle legal matters too complex for the local magistrate." Something about the judge's bearing reminded Sophia uncomfortably of her father, the same rigid posture, the same cold assessment in his gaze as he surveyed the congregation. When his eyes landed on her, she felt a chill despite the warmth of the crowded church. The service proceeded without incident, though Sophia found herself distracted by the judge's presence several rows behind her. When the congregation rose to sing, she was startled to hear Sheriff Daniels's deep voice joining in beside her. He caught her surprised glance, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile that made her miss the next line of the hymn entirely. After the service, Mrs. Reynolds insisted on introducing Sophia to what felt like every resident of Clearwater Creek. Names and faces blurred together as she shook hands and answered the same questions repeatedly about her background and teaching experience. She kept her answers vague but pleasant, mentioning Philadelphia and her education while carefully avoiding any details about her family or the circumstances that had brought her west. "Miss Lambert," a deep voice interrupted as she was speaking with the blacksmith's wife. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Sophia turned to find Judge Blackwell standing before her, his piercing blue eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. "Judge Blackwell," she acknowledged, forcing a polite smile. "I'm pleased to meet you." "You're new to our little community," he observed, the statement carrying the weight of a question. "Yes, I arrived just last week. I'll be taking over as the schoolteacher." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed. And what brings a young woman of evident refinement to such a rustic posting?" Before Sophia could formulate an appropriate response, Sheriff Daniels appeared at her side. "Judge," he greeted, his tone respectful but cool. "I see you've met Miss Lambert. We were just becoming acquainted," the judge replied. It's always interesting when newcomers arrive in these frontier towns, especially those who appear quite suddenly. Something in his emphasis made Sophia's stomach tighten with apprehension. Did he know something about her? Was it possible news of her disappearance had reached this far west? "Miss Lambert comes highly recommended," Sheriff Daniels said smoothly. "Mayor Reynolds is pleased to have found someone so qualified on short notice." Judge Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure. Well, Miss Lambert, I look forward to seeing how you settle into our community. These Western territories need civilizing influences." With a slight bow, he moved away to speak with the mayor, leaving Sophia with a lingering sense of unease. "Don't mind the judge," Sheriff Daniels said quietly. "He considers himself the authority on everything and everyone in his jurisdiction." "He seemed very interested in my background," Sophia murmured. "He's interested in everyone's background." The sheriff's eyes followed the judge across the churchyard. "It's his job to be suspicious." Sophia wished she could believe that was all it was, but something about the judge's manner had triggered warning bells in her mind. She would need to be especially careful while he remained in town. The remainder of the day passed peacefully, as Sophia prepared for her first day of teaching, reviewing the previous teacher's notes and organizing her thoughts for the morning lessons. By the time she walked to the boarding house for Martha's Sunday dinner, her nerves about Judge Blackwell had been replaced by anxiety about facing 15 unknown children the next day. Martha's dinner proved to be a lively affair with several guests, besides Sophia, the town doctor, and his wife, the elderly owner of the general store, and 2 young women who worked at the dress shop. The conversation flowed easily, with much laughter and good-natured teasing, particularly directed at Sheriff Daniels. "Our Wyatt nearly got himself thrown from that new stallion of his yesterday," the doctor's wife reported with evident delight. "Prancing around the main street like he was in a circus." "The horse was skittish around the steam engine," Sheriff Daniels corrected, though he smiled at the ribbing. "And I stayed firmly in the saddle, thank you very much." "Only because you were gripping with your knees like your life depended on it," Martha countered, winking at Sophia. "My brother fancies himself a horseman, but that animal's got more sense than he does." Sophia found herself laughing along with the others, drawn into their easy camaraderie. When Sheriff Daniels caught her eye across the table, his expression of mock suffering made her laugh even harder. "Miss Lambert," he said, clearly attempting to change the subject, "are you prepared for tomorrow's educational adventures?" "As ready as I can be," she replied. "Though I suspect I'll be the one learning the most, at least initially." "You'll do splendidly," assured the doctor's wife. "The children have been running wild without proper schooling these past weeks. They'll be grateful for any instruction, even from a novice." "Such confidence you inspire, Caroline," Sheriff Daniels said dryly. "Oh, you know what I mean," Caroline huffed. "Miss Lambert is clearly intelligent and well-spoken. The children will respond to that." As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself relaxing more than she had in months. These people asked no difficult questions, demanded no explanations for her presence among them. They simply accepted her, offering friendship without conditions. When it came time to leave, Sheriff Daniels offered to walk her back to the teacher's cabin, as night had fallen and the path was dark. "I don't want to trouble you," Sophia protested. "It's not far." "No trouble," he replied, already retrieving his hat from the rack by the door. "I need to check on things at that end of town anyway." Martha caught Sophia's eye as they prepared to leave, her expression knowing in a way that made Sophia blush without fully understanding why. The older woman said nothing, however, merely waving them off with instructions to be careful. The night air was cool and clear, stars blazing overhead in a way Sophia had never seen in Philadelphia. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden sidewalks that lined the main street before giving way to the packed earth path leading to the schoolhouse. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Sheriff Daniels asked after they had walked in comfortable silence for several minutes. "Terrified," Sophia admitted with a small laugh. "What if I can't control the classroom? What if the parents object to my methods? What if the children hate me?" "They won't hate you," he assured her. "Though you might have to establish your authority early with some of them. Children can sense fear like wolves." "That's not helping," she groaned. He chuckled, the sound warm in the darkness. "You'll be fine. Just remember that you know more than they do, even if they try to convince you otherwise." They reached the teacher's cabin, and Sophia turned to face him, suddenly reluctant for their walk to end. "Thank you for escorting me." "My pleasure." He remained on the small porch as she unlocked the door, making no move to leave. "Miss Lambert." "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. "I was wondering if you might consider having dinner with me on Friday evening. The hotel restaurant serves a decent meal, and I thought you might appreciate a chance to discuss how your first week went." The invitation caught Sophia by surprise, though not an unpleasant one. Yes, I'd like that." Even in the dim light, she could see his smile. "Good. I'll call for you at 6. As she watched him walk away, Sophia was struck by the strangeness of her situation. A week ago, she had been sleeping beside railroad tracks, desperate and alone. Now she had a job, a home, and apparently a dinner engagement with the town sheriff. Life did indeed take strange turns. Morning arrived with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Sophia dressed carefully in her cleanest borrowed dress, braided her hair in a simple but neat style, and walked the short distance to the schoolhouse with her heart pounding in her chest. Children were already gathering outside, some accompanied by parents, others arriving in small groups. They fell silent as she approached, watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Good morning," she greeted them, striving to sound more confident than she felt. "I'm Miss Lambert, your new teacher." A small girl with pigtails stepped forward. "Can you do sums? Miss Peterson couldn't do hard sums." "Yes, I can do sums," Sophia assured her, fighting a smile. "My pa says women shouldn't be teaching boys older than 10, announced a freckled boy near the back of the group. "Says they can't maintain discipline." Sophia met his challenging gaze directly. "Your father is entitled to his opinion. However, in this classroom, I will be maintaining discipline regardless of anyone's age or gender." "Is that clear?" The boy looked surprised but nodded grudgingly. Taking a deep breath, Sophia unlocked the schoolhouse door. "Please enter in an orderly fashion and find your seats. We have much to accomplish today." To her relief, the children complied, filing into the building with minimal pushing and shoving. As they settled onto their benches, Sophia moved to the teacher's desk and rang the small bell that sat upon it. "Welcome to a new school term," she began. "I look forward to getting to know each of you and helping you learn. Let's begin by introducing ourselves." The morning proceeded more smoothly than she had dared hope. After introductions, Sophia administered simple assessments to understand each child's level of progress in reading, writing, and arithmetic. By lunchtime, she had a reasonably clear picture of the educational landscape. She was facing several children were quite advanced, others struggled with basics, and a few fell somewhere in between. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Sophia noticed Sheriff Daniels approaching on horseback. He dismounted near the fence and tipped his hat to her as she walked over to greet him. "How's the first day progressing?" he asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "Though I've identified at least 3 troublemakers already," he grinned. "Let me guess, Jimmy Hale, Thomas Wilson, and Sarah Jenkins." Sophia blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "Those 3 have been in my office more times than I can count for various misdemeanors," he explained. "Nothing serious, just high spirits and poor judgment." "I'll keep a close eye on them," Sophia promised. "They're good kids underneath it all," he assured her. "Just need firm boundaries." He glanced at the playing children, then back to her. "I won't keep you from your duties. Just wanted to see how you were faring." The fact that he had taken time from his day specifically to check on her warmed Sophia more than it probably should have. "Thank you. That's very kind." "Nothing kind about it," he replied with a slight smile. "Town's invested in your success. I'm just ensuring our investment is sound." But the twinkle in his eye told her there might be more to his visit than official interest, and that possibility stayed with her throughout the afternoon lessons. By the end of the week, Sophia had settled into a teaching routine and was beginning to form connections with her students. As Sheriff Daniels had predicted, establishing her authority early had been crucial. She had sent Jimmy Hale to stand in the corner on the very first day when he attempted to place a frog on her chair, and word of her swift response had spread quickly among the students. Friday evening arrived, and with it came a flutter of nerves as Sophia prepared for dinner with the sheriff. She had washed her hair and pinned it more elaborately than usual, and Martha had lent her a pretty shawl to wear over her everyday dress. "Not that you need any help catching my brother's eye," Martha had said with a knowing smile as she handed over the shawl. "He's been watching you since the moment he found you by those tracks." Sophia had protested that the dinner was merely a friendly gesture, but Martha's skeptical expression made it clear she didn't believe that for a moment. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded on the teacher's cabin door. Sophia opened it to find Sheriff Daniels standing on her porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and what appeared to be a newly trimmed beard. "Miss Lambert," he greeted her, his eyes traveling briefly over her appearance with evident appreciation. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You look very nice yourself." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling strangely formal despite the casual nature of their plans. As they walked toward the hotel at the center of town, several people they passed nodded or called greetings, some with barely concealed interest in their paired appearance. Is everyone in town always so attentive? Sophia asked after an older woman had practically stopped in her tracks to stare at them. Sheriff Daniels chuckled. "Small town, not much entertainment besides watching each other's business." "And is the sheriff escorting the new schoolteacher considered particularly entertaining business?" "Probably the most exciting thing to happen since the Wilsons' cow got stuck in the church bell tower last spring," he replied with a grin. The hotel restaurant was modestly appointed, but clean, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows, a luxury in a frontier town. The hostess, a middle-aged woman with a practiced smile, led them to a table near the back. "Our finest table for you, Sheriff," she said with a wink that made Sophia wonder exactly how much speculation had preceded their arrival. Once they were seated and had ordered roast beef for him, chicken for her, an awkward silence fell between them. Sophia searched for a safe topic of conversation. "How long have you been sheriff here?" she finally asked. 3 years, he answered. Came west after the war, worked as a ranch hand for a while, then deputy in a town near Omaha. When the position opened here, I applied. And do you enjoy it? Being sheriff, I mean. He considered the question seriously. Most days, I like helping people, keeping the peace. Don't much care for the paperwork or dealing with drunks on Saturday nights. Sophia smiled. I can understand that. And you? He asked. How do you find teaching after your first week? Challenging, she admitted, but rewarding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Yesterday, little Mary Collins read an entire passage by herself after struggling all week, and her smile. Sophia shook her head, remembering the girl's pride. It made all the difficult moments worthwhile. Their food arrived, temporarily halting conversation. As they began to eat, Sheriff Daniels seemed to come to some decision. "Miss Lambert," he said, his tone more serious than before, "I hope you'll forgive my directness, but there's something I feel I should tell you." Sophia's stomach tightened with apprehension. "Yes." "Judge Blackwell has been asking questions about you around town." The fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What kind of questions?" "About where you came from, how you arrived here, whether anyone knew your family in Philadelphia." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "I thought you should know." Sophia carefully set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. Did he say why he was interested?" "No, but he received mail from back east yesterday, and his inquiries became more specific afterward." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "I see." Sheriff Daniels leaned forward slightly. "Miss Lambert, Sophia, I haven't asked about your past because I believe everyone deserves the chance to start fresh. But if there's trouble following you, I might be able to help." The genuine concern in his voice almost undid her composure. For a moment, she was tempted to tell him everything about her father's cruelty, her hurried flight after that final, terrible night, the fear that had driven her west. But the words stuck in her throat. "It's complicated," she finally said, "and not something I'm proud of." "Few things worth running from are," he replied quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and in his, she saw no judgment, only a steadfast offer of support that made her heart ache with longing to trust someone again. "My father is a powerful man in Philadelphia," she began hesitantly. "A banker with political connections. He has always been strict, demanding perfection from my mother and me. When she died last year, his behavior became worse." Sheriff Daniels listened silently, his expression grave as she continued. "He arranged a marriage for me to a business associate, a man 40 years my senior who had already buried 2 wives. When I refused..." She unconsciously touched the faded bruise at her temple. "He made it clear that my consent was irrelevant." "He hurt you," the sheriff stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sophia nodded. "That night was worse than usual. I feared he might." She couldn't bring herself to finish the thought. "I took what money I could find, some jewelry that had been my mother's, and left while he was sleeping. I've been traveling west ever since, staying nowhere long enough to be found. And now you fear Judge Blackwell may have information about your disappearance. If my father has reported me missing or worse, accused me of theft, the judge would have legal authority to detain me." Sheriff Daniels was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "The judge leaves tomorrow for the next town on his circuit. He won't return for at least 3 months. By which time he may have forgotten about me," Sophia said hopefully. "Perhaps." But his expression suggested he didn't believe that. "Sophia, I want you to know that regardless of what the judge may learn or suspect, you have friends in Clearwater Creek now, people who will stand by you." The simple declaration brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He reached across the table and briefly covered her hand with his, the contact warm and reassuring. "Now," he said, his tone deliberately lighter, "I believe we should try to enjoy the rest of our meal before it gets cold." Sophia managed a smile, grateful for his understanding and his attempt to restore the evening's pleasant atmosphere. As they resumed eating, the conversation turned to more cheerful topics, amusing stories about the townspeople, Martha's ongoing battle with a family of raccoons that kept raiding her garden, the progress of the railroad construction east of town. By the time they finished dessert, a surprisingly good apple pie, Sophia had almost managed to push her worries about Judge Blackwell to the back of her mind. The walk back to her cabin was pleasant, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. Stars blanketed the sky above them, and the sounds of piano music and laughter drifted from the saloon at the far end of the main street. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Sophia said as they reached her door. "Despite the difficult conversation, I enjoyed myself very much." "As did I." Sheriff Daniels hesitated, then added, "I'd like to do this again if you're willing." His directness both surprised and pleased her. "I'd like that too," he smiled, the expression softening his weathered features in the lamplight. "Good. I'll let you get your rest now. School tomorrow." "It's Saturday tomorrow," she reminded him with a small laugh. "So it is," he acknowledged. "In that case, perhaps you'd consider a ride out to Eagle Creek in the morning. It's peaceful there, and the autumn colors are at their height right now." The invitation was unexpected but welcome. "I'd enjoy that. I'll bring a horse for you. 9 o'clock, perfect." He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. "Sophia." "Yes." For a moment it seemed he might say something significant, but instead he simply smiled. "Sleep well." As she watched him walk away, Sophia felt a complicated mixture of emotions: lingering fear about Judge Blackwell's inquiries, warmth from the sheriff's support, and beneath it all, a growing awareness that her feelings for Wyatt Daniels were becoming deeper than mere gratitude. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for riding. Sophia wore her borrowed blue dress with Martha's shawl and had braided her hair in a practical style that wouldn't come loose while riding. At precisely 9, she heard the sound of horses approaching. Sheriff Daniels, or Wyatt, as she was beginning to think of him in her private thoughts, arrived leading a gentle-looking bay mare alongside his own chestnut stallion. "Morning," he greeted her cheerfully. "This is Daisy. She's the calmest horse in the livery stable, perfect for someone who hasn't ridden much." "Thank you," Sophia said, approaching the mare cautiously. "She's beautiful." With Wyatt's assistance, she mounted the horse, settling into the side saddle with more confidence than she'd felt that first day by the tracks. He adjusted the stirrup for her, his hands efficient but respectful. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." They set off at a leisurely pace, heading west out of town. Once they passed the last buildings, Wyatt led them onto a trail that wound through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of cottonwood trees blazing gold in their autumn colors. "This is breathtaking," Sophia said, taking in the vast landscape. Having grown up in a city, surrounded by buildings and cobblestone streets, the openness of the plain still amazed her. "I've never seen such space." "It takes some getting used to," Wyatt replied. "When I first came west, I couldn't sleep for weeks. Too quiet, too much sky. Now I can't imagine living any other way." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats of their horses and the occasional call of a meadowlark. After about an hour they crested a small rise, and Sophia gasped at the view below: a clear stream winding through a grove of trees, their leaves a riot of red and gold against the blue sky. Eagle Creek, Wyatt announced, leading them down toward the water. Best spot for a rest in the county. They dismounted in a small clearing near the creek, and Wyatt removed a blanket and small bundle from his saddlebag. "I brought some provisions," he explained, spreading the blanket on the ground. "Nothing fancy: bread, cheese, some of Martha's apple preserves." "It looks wonderful," Sophia assured him, settling onto the blanket. The simple thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. As they shared the modest meal, conversation flowed easily between them. Wyatt told her about growing up in Kentucky, about losing his parents young and being raised by an aunt, about his experiences in the war that had left him searching for something he couldn't quite name. "Martha followed me west after her husband died," he explained. "Said she couldn't let her only brother face the wilderness alone. Truth is, I think she needed a fresh start as much as I did." "You're fortunate to have each other," Sophia observed, thinking of her own loneliness since her mother's death. "We are," he agreed. "Family's important, though not always the one you're born to. Sometimes you have to make your own." His words resonated with her in unexpected ways. Wasn't that what she was trying to do? Create a new life, perhaps even a new family of sorts, far from the one that had caused her so much pain. After they had eaten, they walked along the creek bank, watching the water flow over smooth stones and listening to the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was the most peaceful moment Sophia had experienced in longer than she could remember. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said softly. "It's lovely." Wyatt looked down at her, his expression warm. "I'm glad you came. I've wanted to show you this place for a while now." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. They had stopped walking, standing face to face beside the murmuring creek. Sophia was acutely aware of how close they were, of the way the dappled sunlight through the trees played across his features. "Wyatt," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. Before she could continue, he reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gentleness of the gesture, so at odds with his strength, made her breath catch. "May I kiss you, Sophia?" he asked, his voice low and sincere. "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers softly, almost reverently, in a kiss that spoke of restraint and respect even as it hinted at deeper feelings. Sophia found herself responding with a yearning she hadn't known she possessed, her hands rising to rest lightly on his chest. When they parted, Wyatt looked down at her with an expression that mingled wonder and affection. "I've been wanting to do that since I found you by those tracks," he admitted. Sophia smiled, feeling a happiness that seemed too large for her body to contain. "Even when I was covered in dirt and looking half wild, even then," he confirmed with a grin. "Though I admit you clean up nicely." She laughed, delighted by his teasing and by the ease between them. This warmth, this gentle humor, this respectful affection was everything she had never known in her previous life. They lingered by the creek for another hour, talking, sharing occasional kisses, and simply enjoying each other's company. When they finally mounted their horses for the return journey, Sophia felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world, as if the axis around which her life revolved had found a new center. The ride back to town was quiet but companionable, both of them content in the knowledge that their relationship had changed in ways that would unfold in the days to come. As they approached the outskirts of Clearwater Creek, however, Wyatt suddenly tensed, his posture alert. "What is it?" Sophia asked, noticing the change immediately. "Rider coming fast," he replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "From town." Sophia followed his gaze and saw a man on horseback galloping toward them, dust rising behind him. As the rider drew closer, she recognized Thomas, one of the railroad workers who boarded at Martha's house. "Sheriff," Thomas called as he approached, reining his horse to a sharp stop. "Been looking everywhere for you. What's happened?" Wyatt demanded, his voice shifting from the warm tones of their private conversation to the authoritative cadence of his official role. "Fire at the livery stable," Thomas reported breathlessly. "Started about an hour ago. The bucket brigades got it mostly contained, but Anderson's missing. They think he might be trapped inside." Without hesitation, Wyatt turned to Sophia. "I have to go. Can you make it back to town on your own?" "Of course," she assured him, though the news of the fire had shaken her. "Go, please, they need you." He gave her a quick, grateful nod before spurring his horse into a gallop, following Thomas back toward town. Sophia urged Daisy into a trot, the peaceful mood of their outing shattered by the emergency. By the time she reached Clearwater Creek, the crisis appeared to be under control. A crowd had gathered around the livery stable, where wisps of smoke still rose from the charred roof, but no flames were visible. As Sophia approached, she heard cheers and saw people clapping a soot-covered Wyatt on the back as he emerged from the building supporting an elderly man who must have been Anderson. Sophia remained at the edge of the crowd, not wanting to intrude on Wyatt's duties. The town doctor took charge of Anderson, leading him to a bench where he could examine him for injuries. Martha appeared at Sophia's side, her face lined with worry. "Thank goodness Wyatt got back when he did," she said, watching her brother direct men to check for remaining hot spots. Anderson was unconscious from the smoke, might not have made it otherwise. "How did the fire start?" Sophia asked. Martha's expression darkened. "That's the question, isn't it? Anderson says he was checking on a new foal when someone hit him from behind. Next thing he knew, Wyatt was dragging him out of a burning building. You think someone started it deliberately? Hard to say, but it wouldn't be the first time we've had trouble lately." Before Sophia could ask what she meant, Wyatt approached them, his face streaked with soot but his eyes alert with purpose. "Anderson's going to be fine," he reported. "Bump on the head and some smoke in his lungs, but the doctor says he'll recover." "Was it set?" Martha asked bluntly. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Looks that way. Found evidence of coal oil along the back wall." He glanced at Sophia, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry about our day." "Don't be ridiculous," she replied firmly. "I'm just glad everyone's safe." He smiled briefly at her response, then turned back to his sister. "I need to organize a search party. Whoever did this can't have gone far." Martha nodded. "I'll have food ready for the men when they return." As Wyatt moved away to speak with several townsmen, Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. The peaceful community that had welcomed her suddenly seemed less secure, and she wondered what other dangers might be lurking beneath its tranquil surface. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity and speculation. The search party Wyatt organized found tracks leading north from town, but lost them at the river. By evening, the sheriff had posted guards at key locations around Clearwater Creek and instructed everyone to report any strangers or unusual activity. Sophia returned to her cabin as darkness fell, locking the door behind her with a new sense of caution. She had just lit the lamp when a soft knock at the door startled her. "Who is it?" she called, approaching warily. "Wyatt," came the response. She opened the door to find him standing on her porch, the lamplight highlighting the lines of fatigue in his face. He had cleaned away the soot and changed his clothes, but his eyes revealed the strain of the day. "I wanted to check on you," he explained. "Make sure you're all right." "I'm fine," she assured him, stepping back to invite him in. "What about you? You must be exhausted." "I've had worse days," he said with a tired smile, entering the small cabin. He declined her offer of coffee with a shake of his head. "Can't stay long. Just wanted to see you before I make my final rounds. You have any idea who might have started the fire?" Wyatt's expression grew serious. "I have suspicions. There's been a series of incidents over the past few months: cattle rustling from outlying ranches, minor thefts in town, a freight wagon ambushed east of here. Could be the work of a small gang operating in the area, or connected to Judge Blackwell's presence," Sophia suggested, voicing the concern that had been nagging at her since hearing about the fire. "I've considered that," he admitted. "The timing is convenient, creating a distraction as he leaves town, but it could also be coincidence." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled by the possibilities. Wyatt noticed her discomfort and moved closer, his hands coming to rest gently on her shoulders. "I don't want you to worry," he said quietly. "I've asked one of my deputies to keep an eye on the schoolhouse, and I'll be checking on you regularly." "I'm not afraid," she told him, though it wasn't entirely true. "Just concerned for the town, for you." His expression softened at her words. "I'll be careful," he promised. One hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin. "Today, before the fire, it meant a great deal to me, Sophia." "To me as well," she whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, more firmly than he had by the creek, as if making a statement or a promise. Sophia responded in kind, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. When they parted, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "I should go," he murmured reluctantly. "I know." He straightened, his expression shifting back to the alert watchfulness of the sheriff. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it unless you know who's calling." "I will," she promised. With a final, lingering look, he left, and Sophia secured the door as instructed. Through the window, she watched his tall figure move down the path toward town, his stride purposeful even after the long, difficult day. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with flames and shadowy figures. When morning arrived, Sophia rose early, determined not to let fear dictate her actions. Sunday was her day of rest, but she decided to use it productively by preparing lessons for the coming week. The town seemed subdued as she walked to church, the usual friendly greetings muted by concerns over yesterday's fire. Wyatt and Martha were already seated when she arrived, and he stood to let her join them, his hand briefly squeezing hers as she took her place beside him. The small gesture of affection, witnessed by many in the congregation, would undoubtedly fuel town gossip, but Sophia found she didn't mind. Judge Blackwell was notably absent, having departed at dawn according to whispered comments Sophia overheard. His absence should have reassured her, but instead it left her with a lingering sense of unfinished business, as if his interest in her had merely been postponed rather than abandoned. After the service, as congregants gathered outside to discuss both spiritual matters and the more immediate concern of the fire, Sophia noticed a stranger watching her from the edge of the churchyard, a well-dressed man with a trim beard and calculating eyes. When he saw her looking in his direction, he touched his hat brim in a gesture that seemed more mocking than respectful. "Wyatt," she said quietly, touching his arm to gain his attention. "Who is that man by the gate?" Wyatt followed her gaze, his expression hardening as he spotted the stranger. "Don't know him," he replied. "Wait here." Before he could approach, however, the man turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner of a nearby building. Wyatt followed quickly but returned moments later with a frustrated expression. "Lost him," he reported. "Mounted a horse and rode north out of town." "Who do you think he was?" Martha asked, having joined them at the church steps. "Don't know," Wyatt repeated, "but I don't like strangers watching our schoolteacher." The incident cast a shadow over the day. Though Wyatt insisted Sophia join them for Sunday dinner at Martha's as planned, the conversation was more subdued than the previous week, with frequent references to the fire and the mysterious stranger. As autumn progressed into early winter, life in Clearwater Creek settled into a rhythm for Sophia. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings often spent in Wyatt's company, sometimes at Martha's boarding house, sometimes walking through town, and increasingly enjoying quiet conversations in her cabin. Their relationship deepened steadily, built on mutual respect and growing affection. The incidents that had troubled the town seemed to diminish after Judge Blackwell's departure. There were no more fires, the cattle rustling stopped, and the mysterious stranger was not seen again. Gradually, Sophia allowed herself to believe that perhaps her past had not followed her to this new life after all. December brought the first heavy snowfall, transforming Clearwater Creek into a wonderland of white. The schoolchildren were delighted by the change in weather, and Sophia found herself extending recess to allow them time for snowball fights and snow angels. One evening, as she and Wyatt sat before the fire in her cabin, she reflected on how much her life had changed in the months since he had found her beside the tracks. "I never expected to find this," she said softly, her hand entwined with his as they watched the flames dance in the hearth. Safety, purpose, happiness. Wyatt turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting both the firelight and something deeper, more personal. "When I found you that morning, I had no idea how much you would come to mean to me." "And how much is that?" she asked, her heart beating faster at his tone. Instead of answering directly, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, which he held closed in his palm. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "I'm not sure there is a perfect moment, so perhaps now is as good as any." He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Martha kept it all these years, waiting for me to find someone worthy of it." Sophia's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "Wyatt, I love you, Sophia," he said simply. "I think I began falling in love with you that first day, dirty face and all. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Oh, yes." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they parted, he kept her close, his expression turning more serious. "There's something we should discuss now that we're planning a future together." "What is it?" she asked, sensing his concern. "Your father," he said gently. "If we marry, there may be legal implications. I don't want him to have any claim on you, or to be able to cause trouble for us later." The mention of her father dimmed her happiness slightly, but she appreciated Wyatt's practical approach. "What do you suggest?" "Judge Blackwell returns next month for his regular circuit. I think we should speak with him, explain the situation truthfully. He's strict about the law, but he's fair. If your father has made any legal claims about your departure, we need to address them properly." The thought of confronting the judge and, by extension, her past filled Sophia with apprehension. But Wyatt was right. She couldn't build a new life on a foundation of fear and secrets. "All right," she agreed. "We'll speak with him together." The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with both anticipation and anxiety for Sophia. News of her engagement to Sheriff Daniels spread quickly through town, bringing congratulations from all quarters and a flurry of invitations to holiday gatherings. Martha was especially delighted, embracing Sophia as the sister she had always wanted. Amidst the celebration, however, loomed the knowledge that Judge Blackwell would return in January, potentially bringing with him information about her father's actions following her flight. Wyatt did his best to reassure her, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that her happiness remained precarious, subject to forces beyond her control. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow and a sense of festivity throughout Clearwater Creek. The schoolchildren had performed a nativity play the previous day, and Sophia had given each of them a small gift hand-copied poems for the older students and colorful paper ornaments for the younger ones. Their delight had warmed her heart and reinforced her growing attachment to the community. That evening, Martha hosted a dinner for Sophia, Wyatt, and several close friends. The boarding house was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and the meal was the most sumptuous Sophia had experienced since leaving Philadelphia. Roast goose, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and multiple pies for dessert. As they sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, Sophia was struck by how completely these people had accepted her into their lives. Here, she wasn't judged by her family connections or social standing, but by her own character and actions. The contrast with her former life couldn't have been more stark. After dinner, while the others gathered around the piano for carols, Wyatt drew Sophia aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner of the sitting room. "A Christmas gift." From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple string. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically, "but I thought you might like it." Sophia unwrapped the gift carefully to reveal a book of poetry. Wordsworth, one of her favorites. "Oh, Wyatt," she breathed, opening the volume to find a handwritten inscription inside the cover. "To Sophia, who found her way to my heart, with all my love, Wyatt. I noticed you didn't have many books," he explained. "Martha mentioned you like poetry." The thoughtfulness of the gift, so perfectly suited to her, brought tears to her eyes. "It's perfect," she told him. "I love it, and I love you." She had her own gift for him, a knitted scarf she had worked on during quiet evenings, her first attempt at such a project. The stitches were uneven in places, but she had persevered, wanting to give him something made by her own hands. Wyatt accepted it with genuine appreciation, wrapping it around his neck immediately despite the warmth of the room. "It's excellent," he declared. "And just what I needed for winter patrols." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Wyatt walked Sophia back to her cabin through the gently falling snow. The town was quiet, most residents already home for the night, celebrating with their families. Lanterns glowed in windows, casting warm light onto the white-covered street. "I've been thinking," Wyatt said as they approached her door. "After we're married, this cabin will be too small for us." "Oh," Sophia replied, surprised by the practical turn of the conversation. "I hadn't thought about it. I have land at the edge of town," he continued. "Been saving to build a house there someday. With your permission, I'd like to start construction in the spring." The idea of a home built specifically for their future together filled Sophia with joy. "I'd like that very much," she said, "though I don't know the first thing about designing a house." He smiled down at her, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. "We'll figure it out together, maybe 2 bedrooms to start with." "2?" she questioned. His smile turned slightly shy. "1 for us and 1 for, well, for the future, if you want children." The thought of having a family with Wyatt children who would be raised with love and respect rather than fear made Sophia's heart swell with emotion. "I do," she whispered. "Very much." He kissed her then, in the quiet stillness of the snowy night, and Sophia felt as though all the pieces of her broken past were finally coming together to form a future brighter than she had ever dared to imagine. January arrived with bitter cold, and the news that Judge Blackwell would be returning to Clearwater Creek on the 15th. Wyatt had written to him in advance, requesting a private meeting upon his arrival, but had received no reply. The uncertainty added to Sophia's growing nervousness about the confrontation. What if he has a warrant for my arrest? She asked Wyatt one evening as they discussed the situation. What if my father has accused me of theft? Then we'll face it together, Wyatt assured her. I have friends in the territorial government who can help if needed. Your father may be powerful in Philadelphia, but his reach only extends so far. His confidence bolstered her courage, but Sophia couldn't help worrying. The jewelry she had taken her mother's pieces, which by rights should have been hers anyway, could indeed be considered theft in legal terms. And her father was not a man who forgave perceived slights. On the morning of the 15th, Sophia found it difficult to focus on teaching. Her students noticed her distraction, exchanging confused glances when she lost her place in the reading lesson twice. By lunchtime, her nerves were so frayed that she decided to dismiss the class early, claiming a headache. As the last child departed, Sophia sat at her desk, trying to compose herself for the meeting with Judge Blackwell. Wyatt had arranged for it to take place at his office at 3 o'clock, giving the judge time to settle in after his journey. A knock at the schoolhouse door startled her from her thoughts. Expecting Wyatt, she was surprised to find Martha standing on the steps, her expression unusually serious. "Thought you might need some company," Martha said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "My brother's busy preparing for your meeting, so I took it upon myself to check on you." Sophia smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I admit I'm not managing my anxiety very well." Martha snorted. "Anyone would be anxious in your position, but I want you to know something." She sat in one of the student desks, facing Sophia directly. "Whatever happens today, you're not alone anymore. Your family now, or will be soon enough, and we Daniels stand by our own." The simple declaration of loyalty brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "I don't know what I did to deserve you both," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You survived," Martha replied firmly. "You kept your spirit intact despite whatever that father of yours did. That's more than enough in my book." They talked for nearly an hour, Martha's practical outlook and unwavering support helping to calm Sophia's fears. By the time they left the schoolhouse to walk to Wyatt's office, Sophia felt more prepared for whatever might come. The sheriff's office was a small building near the town hall, containing a simple desk, several chairs, and 2 cells at the back, currently unoccupied. Wyatt was waiting for them, his expression a careful neutral that Sophia had come to recognize as his official face. "Judge Blackwell will be here soon," he informed them. "Martha, I'm not sure you need to. I'm staying," Martha interrupted firmly. "Unless Sophia objects." Sophia shook her head, grateful for the other woman's stalwart presence. "I'd like you to stay," Wyatt nodded, accepting their decision. "Very well, but let me do most of the talking, at least initially." They didn't have long to wait. At precisely 3 o'clock the door opened and Judge Blackwell entered, removing his hat as he stepped inside. He was accompanied by a clerk carrying a leather portfolio. "Sheriff Daniels," the judge acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Lambert." "Mrs. Daniels." "Judge," Wyatt replied, gesturing to the chairs arranged before his desk. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." The judge sat with deliberate slowness, his gaze lingering on Sophia in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Your letter mentioned a matter of some delicacy concerning Miss Lambert's situation," he said once his clerk was seated beside him. "I confess I've been curious about her arrival in Clearwater Creek since we first met. Miss Lambert came west seeking a fresh start," Wyatt began carefully, "as many do. She has become a valued member of our community, serving as our schoolteacher," and he hesitated only briefly, "and recently agreeing to become my wife." Judge Blackwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "Congratulations," he said, though his tone lacked warmth. "However, I must inform you that there may be complications regarding Miss Lambert's legal status." Sophia's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain outwardly calm. "What kind of complications?" Wyatt asked. The judge nodded to his clerk, who opened the portfolio and extracted several papers. "I received communications from Philadelphia regarding a young woman matching Miss Lambert's description. According to these documents, Sophia Lambert left her father's home on the night of June 12th, taking with her valuable jewelry and a substantial sum of money." "My mother's jewelry," Sophia interjected, unable to remain silent. "Items that should have passed to me upon her death." Judge Blackwell regarded her with cool assessment. "Perhaps so, but the law recognizes your father as the head of household and rightful owner of the family's property." "Did her father file formal charges?" Wyatt asked, his voice level despite the tension Sophia could see in his shoulders. "Not precisely," the judge admitted. "He reported her missing and mentioned the missing items, but stopped short of accusing her of theft. His primary concern, according to his correspondence, is his daughter's welfare." Sophia couldn't contain a bitter laugh at this claim. "My welfare? The man who did this," she pushed back her hair to reveal the faint scar where her temple had been bruised, "cares nothing for my welfare. He cares only for his control." Judge Blackwell's expression remained impassive. "Family disputes are common, Miss Lambert. Without evidence of severe mistreatment, the law generally considers a father's authority over an unmarried daughter to be absolute." "So what exactly is my father asking you to do?" Sophia demanded, fear giving way to anger. "Drag me back to Philadelphia in chains, Sophia," Wyatt cautioned quietly. The judge held up a hand. "Your father has requested that I confirm your identity and location, and that I convey his wish for your return. He offers full forgiveness for any misunderstanding that led to your departure." "And if I refuse?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "As you are of legal age, I cannot force your return," Judge Blackwell conceded. "However, should your father choose to pursue the matter of the missing valuables, that would become a criminal concern." The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Sophia felt trapped, her newfound happiness threatened by the long reach of her father's influence. Beside her, Martha made a sound of disgust. "Sounds to me like a man using the law to bully his daughter," Martha said bluntly. "Not the first time and won't be the last." Judge Blackwell frowned at her interruption. "The law is not concerned with personal interpretations of family dynamics, Mrs. Daniels. It deals with facts." "Then perhaps we should establish some additional facts," Wyatt suggested, his tone carefully controlled. "Sophia has built a new life here. She's respected, employed, and engaged to be married. Forcing her to abandon all of that to return to a situation she fled at great personal risk seems neither just nor necessary." "I'm not forcing anything," the judge replied, "merely conveying information and potential consequences." Martha made another sound of disagreement, but remained silent at a glance from her brother. "Judge Blackwell," Sophia said, gathering her courage, "I will not return to Philadelphia. My father's forgiveness means nothing to me, and I have no desire for any further contact with him. If he wishes to pursue legal action regarding the jewelry which I maintain was rightfully mine, then I will face those consequences." The judge studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You seem quite determined." "I am." "And you, Sheriff?" The judge turned to Wyatt. "Are you equally determined to proceed with this marriage, knowing the potential legal complications?" Wyatt's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely." Something shifted in Judge Blackwell's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps a grudging respect. He turned to his clerk. "Wait outside, please, Mr. Harrison. I need a private word with these good people." The clerk looked surprised but complied, gathering his papers and exiting the office. When the door closed behind him, Judge Blackwell leaned forward, his manner changing subtly. "Now that we're speaking less officially," he began, "I should inform you that I made some inquiries about Edward Lambert after our first meeting, Miss Lambert. Your father's reputation for strictness is well known in certain circles." Sophia felt a flicker of hope at this unexpected turn. "You believe me about his treatment?" "Let's say I find your account credible," the judge replied carefully. "And while the law may recognize a father's authority, it does not condone cruelty. However, proving such claims would be difficult, especially across such distance." "What are you suggesting, Judge?" Wyatt asked. Judge Blackwell steepled his fingers, considering his words. "Marriage would place Miss Lambert under her husband's protection rather than her father's, legally speaking. If the ceremony were to take place before I complete my official response to Mr. Lambert's inquiry, I might, perhaps, mention only that his daughter is now Mrs. Daniels, happily settled and not inclined to return east." Sophia could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You would do that?" "I uphold the law, Miss Lambert, but I also believe in justice. Sometimes the two are not perfectly aligned." He paused, then added, "As for the matter of the jewelry, I would suggest that, as a wedding gift, your husband might consider sending Mr. Lambert a sum equivalent to their value. Not as admission of wrongdoing, but as a gesture that might discourage further pursuit of the matter." Wyatt nodded slowly. "That could be arranged. Then I see no reason why this situation cannot be resolved to everyone's satisfaction," Judge Blackwell concluded, rising from his chair. "I believe Reverend Collins is available on short notice, should you wish to expedite your nuptials." Martha let out a surprised laugh. "Well, I'll be, Judge, you're not half as heartless as you look." The judge's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. "I'll take that as a compliment, Mrs. Daniels." As the judge prepared to leave, Sophia found her voice. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't forget your kindness." Judge Blackwell paused at the door, his expression serious once more. "I'm not doing this out of kindness, Miss Lambert. I'm doing it because it serves justice without violating the law. There's a difference." With that, he departed, leaving the three of them staring after him in stunned silence. Martha was the first to recover. "Well, seems like we have a wedding to plan, and quickly." Wyatt turned to Sophia, taking her hands in his. "Are you all right with this? Getting married sooner than we planned?" Sophia smiled, feeling as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I've never been more certain of anything," she assured him. "The sooner I become Mrs. Daniels, the happier I'll be." 3 days later, on a bright January morning, Sophia stood beside Wyatt in the small church of Clearwater Creek, exchanging vows before Reverend Collins and a gathering of friends who had quickly assembled when word of the hastened wedding spread through town. Martha had somehow managed to procure a new dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant blue gown that complemented Sophia's coloring perfectly. As Sophia spoke her promises, looking up into Wyatt's steady gray eyes, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperate young woman sleeping in the dirt beside railroad tracks to a bride surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her, it seemed almost like a dream. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Collins declared with a warm smile. "Sheriff, you may kiss your bride." Wyatt's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, sealing their commitment before God and their community. As they turned to face the congregation, hands joined, Sophia felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. The celebration afterward at Martha's boarding house was joyful and boisterous, with food and music and more well-wishes than Sophia could count. Judge Blackwell made a brief appearance, offering formal congratulations before departing to continue his circuit. His clerk carried a sealed envelope that Sophia suspected contained the official response to her father's inquiry. As evening approached, Wyatt led his new wife away from the celebration toward the house he had been renting, now their home, until the new one could be built in the spring. The townsfolk sent them off with cheers and good-natured teasing that made Sophia blush despite her happiness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Daniels," Wyatt said softly as they crossed the threshold, his arms sweeping her up in a gesture both traditional and unexpectedly romantic from the usually reserved sheriff. "I like the sound of that," Sophia replied, her arms around his neck as he carried her into their shared future. Mrs. Daniels, home. In the months that followed, Sophia's new life continued to unfold in ways that constantly surprised and delighted her. Spring brought construction on their new house, a sturdy two-story home at the edge of town with a view of the creek and mountains beyond. Summer saw the completion of the school year and Sophia's confirmation as the permanent teacher, her position now secure and respected. And autumn brought the most wonderful change of all, as Sophia shared with Wyatt the news that their family would be growing by one in the coming spring. On a crisp October evening, almost exactly 1 year after Wyatt had found her beside the tracks, they sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Wyatt's hand rested gently on Sophia's slightly rounded belly, his expression one of wonder and contentment. "Did I ever tell you," he asked quietly, "that when I first saw you that morning I almost rode past?" Sophia turned to him in surprise. "Really? Why didn't you?" "Something told me to stop. Call it instinct or providence or just plain curiosity." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "Best decision I ever made." Sophia leaned against him, grateful beyond words for the life they had built together. "Mine too," she whispered. "Coming home with you." From the lonely, desperate woman who had slept in the dirt beside the tracks to the loved and loving wife, mother-to-be, and respected teacher she had become, Sophia's journey had been unexpected in every way. But as she sat in the gathering dusk with her husband's arm around her and their child growing beneath her heart, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home at last.